Welcome to another dose of Teflon and Titanium. I am your host, Scotty G, back at it again. Today, we are going to go over the erotic blueprints in detail. But first, check out my socials and the website Marriage Isn't Dead for my up-to-date info on how to keep monogamy hot in dating and marriage. So let's talk about sex again, shall we? So, my mission with this podcast is to offer you a roadmap of different preferences men and women have regarding sex. If you have issues in your bedroom, you may not totally understand what turns your woman on, or you for that matter. I'm talking to guys and gals with this one. You may have a mismatch on your hands, and I'm going to go over a couple things that are very, very common that I see, and it's very common in the population. So, while folks have the same basic sexual programming evolutionarily. We want to mate with the highest quality person we can attract, essentially. Everyone has different tastes when it comes to the bedroom. So, why do I want to talk about the erotic blueprints? I call them the 5 love languages of your bedroom. It's a really good way of explaining certain preferences and tastes in a logical manner, and everybody loves their labels. And the blueprints has plenty. So the blueprints are as follows: sensual, energetic, sexual, kink, and shapeshifter. So there's 5 of them. I first heard of the erotic blueprints when my wife and I watched the Netflix show called Sex, Love, and Goop. It was a series on Netflix of, I think it was a few years back, and there's a sexologist named Jaya, Jaiya. She was the one that coined these after she dealt with couples for 20 years, trying to heal bedrooms and sexual issues. There's no real scientific data to support this concept, much like the love languages, actually. So these are just great observations that she had, and it rationalizes and categorizes human behaviors. And that's what I love about this so much. Like I said, it's not a scientific thing, but it really puts people in boxes and labels them so we can understand it just a little bit better. So that's why I want to go over this. So be careful when looking at these because it's more of a spectrum. So I say people put people in boxes and label them. Well, there's a spectrum in this whole thing. So you can lean to one blueprint and kind of blend into another one. Keep that in mind. So people have preferences, but that doesn't mean they don't respond to other things. Okay. It's just like the love languages. You could prefer uh, quality time, but you also love to get gifts or give gifts. It's all the same type of thing. I'm not a huge fan of the love languages personally. That's just me. But the erotic blueprints, I'm a huge fan. This is really, really good stuff. So definitely worth your time and definitely worth my time of actually putting this out for you. So I personally think that the blueprints apply more to women, but it definitely applies to men as well. So men have a tendency to be a little bit more open to just about anything, just generally speaking, because we have testosterone. We think about sex all the time. Not all the time, but we definitely think about sex more than women on average. So we're into other things a little bit more than women, but obviously it does apply to both sex. So when you prefer something and your needs aren't being met, you need to speak up, and that's what I'm going to help you with. All right. So another thing I want to talk about first before I get into the blueprints is, where do fetishes and the blueprints come from? Why do we have certain preferences in the bedroom? I want to dive into that just real quick. And obviously, we could do a whole podcast on that alone, but I just want to get over that first before we really get into the blueprints. So, our preferences a lot of times come from repetition and sexual experiences. Women have a tendency to be a little bit more fluid over time. So, it's the main reason you should introduce novelty regularly in your bedroom. Okay. So, you do have preferences for certain experiences, but how do you know that you're into something when you've never done it before? So that's why you want to introduce novelty, especially in monogamy. It makes it interesting. It It spices things up, and if things don't work out, you know you don't like it. So how do you know you don't like it if you've never tried it before? It's just like, trying new foods. It's exactly the same thing. So how do you know if you've never been exposed to it? So the preferences that people have and fetishes, it's strongly influenced by early exposure to sexual activity when you were younger. So you form mental associations, and you bond with what you experience first sexually. It's all over the literature. So, example, you grew up looking for the lingerie section of catalogs. So, that equates to a lingerie kink in adulthood. Or you had a girlfriend in high school who only performed blowjobs because she didn't like penetrative sex because she didn't want to get pregnant, or she just didn't want to go there. So she performed blowjobs exclusively on you. That will produce more of a blowjob fixation in adulthood. So, and one more thing I want to talk about before we get into the blueprints. Miss Jaya, she states in each blueprint, there is a shadow. So you've got the blueprint and you've got essentially the antithesis of that particular blueprint. And I'm going to go over all of those things when I go through it. So you've got the preference, and you've got the thing that will actually shut you down if you have that blueprint. So I'm going to go through all 5 of them here. So let's talk about them. So the first one, the sexual blueprint. This is one of the 2 biggies. You get turned on by genital stimulation primarily. It's on. Okay. Sexual blueprint folks, they like to just get into it. They like quickies, they like nudity, plain Jane sex. Let's do it and let's get out. Okay. So they can do quickies and be completely satisfied, totally satisfied. Usually these kind of people typically orgasm very easily and within just a few minutes. Not everybody's like that. Obviously, guys have a tendency to be more of a sexual blueprint because we're built in some cases to orgasm very quickly. Women in general don't have that ability. On average, it takes a woman 35 to 40 minutes to warm up to the point where she can actually orgasm. So the sexual blueprint is very common in men, very common in men. So the shadow, the antithesis of the sexual blueprint, is focusing too much on the orgasm. You're going to miss the rest of the good stuff just concentrating on coming. Okay. That can be a big problem for the sexual blueprint people because you just totally focus on the orgasm and you miss all of the other pleasures within sex itself. So that's the shadow. And that's the first one. So sexual, very common in men. Here's the second biggie, sensual. They like massages, they like foreplay, they like touch, they like anticipation. These kind of people take a little warming up to get in the mood. Does that sound familiar with responsive desire and women? That's because it is. It's a very, very common erotic blueprint for women, particularly. So men have a tendency to lean sexual, women have a tendency to lean sensual because of the way we're built, essentially. So it's it's not necessarily a given. Just because you're a man, you're going to be like this, or just because you're a woman, you're going to be sensual. It doesn't work that way, but people have a tendency to lean as a sensual if you're a woman. Okay, very, very common. So the shadow of a sensual blueprint is getting stuck in their heads. So they get out of their body and into their head and instantly will shut down a session. That's a very, very common thing for women, and especially if you've got kids and you're married. All of a sudden, there's a little creak in the floor. Something happens. All of a sudden, she gets out of her body and she gets into her head, and the session is going to take a belly flop. Okay, it's pretty common with a sensual blueprint. So if something doesn't go well, it's too cold in the room, it's taking too long to orgasm, they have a tendency to basically start shutting down at that point. They get frustrated. All right. So that's the sensual blueprint. That's the second one. So the 2 biggies is sexual and sensual. Men are sexual, women have a tendency to be more sensual. The third one, a lot of people's favorite to talk about, it's juicy, and that's kink. You're turned on by the taboo. Something that you're not supposed to get into turns you on. So whatever taboo or whatever is taboo to an individual person will be their turn on if you have a kink blueprint. So there's two different types, subsets of the kink blueprint. One is psychological, which is basically power dynamics. That's your sub dom, uh, BDSM type stuff. That's the psychological stuff. And then you have the sensation based. So that's your ropes, that's your toys, that's the impact on skin. It's tactile, a lot more tactile. So one is more psychological, another one is tactile. So those are the two main types of kink. It can be any fetish, anything. So it's not just dom and sub. It could be furries if you're into mascots, if you're into feet, if you're into stockings, kokeldry, interracial stuff, group stuff. That's kink. Obviously, those things are forbidden in certain circles, and that's going to be a turn on for somebody that has a kink blueprint. So it's specifically centered around either an act, an object, or verbiage. All of those things are kink. Kink is a huge subset within this the erotic blueprints. It's an incredible amount of things that people can get into. Role play is another one, very very common. So let's talk about the shadow of kink. What do you want to avoid if you have a kink blueprint? Shame. Shame, shame, shame. That, generally speaking, is a shadow for anybody in the bedroom. If you shame your partner, if you shame your person, that's they're going to take that personally most of the time, and it's not going to be a good thing. But it's especially bad when it comes to people with kink blueprints. So if you shame your partner for being into feet, I want to see your feet, and you say, why? What the hell is wrong with you? That is not going to go very well for your person. All right, not a good thing. So shadow is shame when it comes to kink. The next one is a little bit more of the unusual in my mind, and it's a little bit more difficult to explain, but it's energetic. These folks are turned on by anticipation as well. Scarcity, if somebody's away for the weekend, it's a serious turn on for them. Music, slow music, fast music, something that's think kind of guru or artsy fartsy guru. This is what we're talking about with energetic people and teasing. So all of that stuff, tantric massage, that's going to be your energetic blueprint. So they have a tendency to be very sensitive and mindful women. Uh, it applies to guys too, but it really think guru style lovers who love yoga. That's the kind of stuff that you're gonna hear about when it comes to energetic blueprints. So energetic women have a tendency to be very highly sensitive. So they're very sensitive to a cold room, cold touch. If you've got cold hands, cold toys, all of that stuff, they're going to be very, very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So energetic blueprints, very, very common to have highly, highly sensitive people. So the shadow for an energetic blueprint is overstimulation. Overstimulation. So once she or he crosses a certain threshold of pleasure or pain or basically a cold room, things like that, they're going to shut down. So they're very, very sensitive to their environment. But once they get overstimulated, if you have a really intense session, it, it's an amazing experience. But they'll completely shut down. They'll be the ones that will be convulsing, and that's the end of the session. So that's the shadow for energetic people. All right, and then the last one, my personal favorite, number 5, shapeshifters. Shapeshifters like it all, but they usually prefer a brand of blueprint, but they like it all. They're open to it all. So women have a tendency to think all men are shapeshifters because they're just horny, right? I disagree with that. Most of the guys I talk to, most of the people I talk to, they do prefer a certain flavor. There's a lot of shapeshifters out there, but there's also a lot of guys that are that have the sexual blueprint. They just like the quickies, or they're the sensual blueprint. I will say a lot of the people I talk to have a tendency to be more of the sensual variety, just based on the people that I've talked to in the past. But those folks are going to have a certain, they'll prefer certain things, but they're very, very open to other things. So those are shapeshifters. So from what I hear from guys is that they can try certain things, but they have a tendency to be, or actually, excuse me, they have a tendency to try certain things, but they have a tendency to be predictable in bed if they're like that. That's a problem. Okay, so don't be predictable in bed, especially as a dude that's listening to this. That is a major issue, and shapeshifters are your goal. That's my goal when I talk to people, expanding your horizons, and turning somebody that has a sexual blueprint into a shapeshifter is possible. It takes it takes some time and some effort, and you have to be open to change. Period. If you want to change, most likely you can change. So shapeshifters shadow what they what can shut them down is they feel like they're too much. Especially their partner, when no sex is going to satisfy them, more, they can focus way too much on pleasing others and not themselves. That's a really common dynamic with shapeshifters. It's I will say I am a shapeshifter, and it's I have been that way in the past where I focus a little bit more too much on my partner and not myself. And that's a tactic that's something that you need to work on. You definitely need to focus on your own pleasure, but you also need to consider your partner at the same time. I always call it 80-20 rule: 80% you, 20% them. That has a tendency to really work well, because you can take the pleasure, or take the pressure off of your woman, especially talking to you guys. If you focus more on your own pleasure and do what you want, she's open to get more into her body and not in her head. It's a That's a really really big take home from you. Okay, so now I will say this this concept is it's all on missjaya.com. If you want to take a look at her website, there's a ton of stuff out there. Um, so you can take a quiz to determine what your blueprint is, but if you listen to this podcast with detail, you probably know where you are on that. But it's a great conversation starter, if you want to have your wife, your husband take the quiz and figure out what they like, and you can share that information, and then that's going to be a very very good way of opening up your bedroom, and it's a great conversation starter. So highly recommend that. And interesting to note on the website too, that she's got a program that people go through. She's a sexologist. This is what she does. And I use this basically just to explain things, but she has a program that people go through, and she basically says once they go through the program, everyone becomes shapeshifters, which that's why I think this isn't a super scientific thing. It's basically the more you open up yourself to new experiences, um, with some restraint, obviously, um, you can find something else that you're into. So just because you prefer something in the bedroom doesn't mean that you won't be into something else. So I personally think that everyone can be a shapeshifter, and that's my personal goal when I talk to people. So the big takeaways from this podcast. So there's a quiz you can take. Obviously, when you're listening to this, you probably already know what you prefer, but it could really describe, or really illustrate what your wife, your husband's into, and you can work with that. Another thing that I see commonly with the erotic blueprints are common mismatches. A very very common thing that I see and I've seen over the years when I talk to people. The most common thing I would say with the mismatches is when a sexual blueprint woman, which is an avoidant attachment trait, by the way, and a sensual man, which that's a preoccupied trait, are together. So she's into the quickies, and he's into the longer sessions and the anticipation and the foreplay. That is a very, very common mismatch, and it usually causes pretty big problems in the bedrooms. They don't really understand each other. That's the problem. So it's not quite as bad when it comes to a sexual man and a sensual woman, because obviously those are the most common out there. But if you flip the roles where the woman is the sexual and the man is the sensual, that's a bad match. Okay, that's not exactly good chemistry in the bedroom. So the sexual women don't really understand men who like to cuddle and touch before the act of sex or even afterwards. They don't understand that. They just want to get it on and get on with their day. And sensual men in that situation feel like their needs aren't being met and they aren't satisfied. Like a 5-minute quickie isn't going to do it for them. And so they'd rather have the hour long session over the 10-minute quickie. So the best remedy in that situation, if that's describing your situation, is finding common ground. Talk about it. You've got to talk about it. If there's a problem, and if you're listening to me, you probably know there's an issue. If you hear this, how will she know if you don't say anything? Okay, and do it in a non-needy way, babe. I prefer this. My needs aren't being met, babe. That's it. You don't have to say you don't like me. I need this. That's that's not good. That's a huge turnoff for women, especially. And another common mismatch is basically kinky folks versus all the other ones. Okay, if you've got a true blue kink blueprint, and you're with somebody that's basically anything else, this is especially true if your woman is a submissive and the man is not dominant. That's where problems occur, big problems. Okay, so if folks don't engage in their kink, they're probably not going to fully enjoy sex. Like I said, most commonly is when you have a submissive woman and a passive guy. He's not dominant in the bedroom. That is a major, major problem. If that describes your situation, give me a call. Okay, take a look at my website, take a look at and how you can contact me, because that's actually something that's fairly easy to fix. Um, if you're a woman and this describes your man, send him my way. That is one of my specialties. Okay, so ultimately, what am I saying with all of this? So the mismatch remedy pretty much is open communication, talk about it, and action. Okay, you've got to do something about it. If you want to have a fully impactful sex life and you're not getting it from your person, you've got to say something. Okay, but like I said, in a non needy way, in an assertive way, in a loving way. It's fairly easy to do for folks like myself, but I know that a lot of passive men and women have a tendency to not say anything, and it just festers and ultimately can have the potential to end your marriage when it could be just a simple fix. So if she likes the quickies and you like the longer sessions, tell her, and you both can find a common ground. That's how this works. Find a common ground, give and take, compromise. That's what marriage and long-term monogamy is all about. Your soulmates don't exist. You can mold your person, your wife or your husband or your girlfriend or your boyfriend into someone that you prefer to a point, but you can't change them, okay, unless they want to be changed. That's the difference, okay? So another common remedy, here's an example, okay? So a simple hand job. As a man, you can tell or show a woman that the underside of the glands, the frenulum, is the most sensitive part of your penis. It's not the base of the shaft. There's very few nerve endings at the base of the shaft, and there's a ton of nerve endings at your frenulum. Well, she doesn't have a penis, y'all. she doesn't know what she doesn't know. Tell her. It's okay to tell her, and especially if she's got a kink blueprint and she likes direction, she's a submissive, That's your opportunity to be a dominant, my friend. Tell her in an assertive way during the act. Show her. Win, 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 win. Okay. So if you like lingerie, tell her you like lingerie. All right. And ladies, if your man tells you he likes lingerie, don't shame him. Okay. Don't shame him. Don't say that's disgusting. You're a pervert, and you all you do is think about sex. That's gonna emasculate him. Period. It's just gonna emasculate a guy. So be open to new things and try it out. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, and then you can actually assert yourself, saying that I'm not really into this, but I'll do it for you, type of thing. Give and take. It's all about compromise. That's what makes marriage and long term monogamy really work. So compromise. So so ladies, if you want him to take control, tell him to be more dominant. Tell him. Okay. Now he may get a little butthurt at first when you do that. He may take it a little bit personally, but he can't read your mind, and vice versa. Okay. So how does how does your person know something's wrong if you don't tell them? Okay. Not everybody's a mind reader. Some people can read body language or nonverbal communication, but not everyone. It's not actually very common. So if they don't know, tell them. Period. Okay. So coaching, my spots are really limited, but reach out to any social media or my email if you have any questions. I love getting questions on my email. Really, I enjoy that kind of thing. It produces content for me too, where I see what the most common questions are, and I've been doing that for years, and I enjoy it. So you're not bothering me. So reach out if you need help. You can join our private Facebook group. There's daily posts in there. That honestly is probably one of the easiest ways to interact with me personally. I'm in there every day, and I try to keep it active and try to keep it fun. And come on in. The water's warm. Okay, so take action, folks. Let's get it done. All right. Until next time. Thanks for listening. For more info, go to marriageisn'tdead.com for my bio, articles, links to like and subscribe to my socials, and how to get in contact with me. Please like, share, subscribe, and hit the follow button on this podcast for new episodes a few times a week. Be desirable.